Hello and welcome to another webinar inside Forest School Philippines. So as you are coming in, and if you want to join the conversation later to comment or to ask your questions, please allow or give permission to StreamYard so we can broadcast your name along with your comment later. So we will be taking time to answer questions if you have any. Today, we will be talking about how nature supports children with special learning needs. And our guest for today, I met her through Instagram. She is Zharee Vargas. She's a pediatric therapist working with children from autism and Down syndrome cases. She specializes in early intervention and consultation with families, caregivers for home program, and being outdoors for treatment sessions. That's why, we clicked. So she's been practicing for 5 years in early intervention and now focusing in home health care, occupational therapy. So joining us live from Makati, let us please welcome teacher Zharee.
Hi, everyone. Hi, good afternoon. Nice to be here.
O, di ba? I mean, you're walking your talk. You're outdoors.
I couldn't pass it up. The sun is beaming so brightly and it's so warm and the breeze is just therapeutic enough for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, tell us a bit about yourself for those who don't know who you are. Something personal. Ayan. So,
Okay.
how it led you to what you're doing now?
Yeah, so I'm teacher Zharee and I'm a pediatric occupational therapist. And as an occupational therapist, what we do in OT is basically provide activities that are meaningful for our clients. So since I am a pediatric therapist, what is important for our kids is also important for us, and what is important for the parents, such as their goals for their children, is what we continuously work on. And throughout my practice, I have been in the clinics. I have been seeing a lot of kids coming in, and most of them are growing up or who have grown up in a condominium or apartment and not much outdoors. And so I started researching a lot about the correlation or any association of lack of movement indoors and how we are able to bridge that so the therapy sessions and the interventions would be more effective. And that's why now, focusing on the home program, I have been working with families and continuously also trying to educate caregivers and parents and family members of the benefits of being in the outdoors, engaging them and asking them to come with every therapy session, because I think it's very important, and nature has a lot of benefits, not just, for the outcomes for therapy, but also physiologically. And yeah, and so we're here.
Has led you to, I mean, are you an outdoors person? I guess that's what I wanted
Very
to
much.
ask, really.
Yes. Yes, I'm biophilic very much. I'm also assuming that you are also biophilic, like really into
Yes.
outdoors. I see your Instagram stories and I couldn't help but be jealous because you're always outdoors now.
Yeah, so to those tuning in from other countries, Cherie's friends, I live in Ilocos where there's low risk right now, and it's easy for us to have access to rivers, to beaches, to
Yeah,
waterfalls, and so on. Okay.
that's amazing. I'm very jealous right now.
Well, at least we have a green space in the middle of the city. Come on.
A tiny
All
bit
right.
of paradise.
Yeah. So let's dive right into our topic, which is, kids with learning disabilities. So, because most of the time parents come to me, they want to join forest school and they're asking, is this okay for kids with special learning disabilities. So probably to
Mhm.
set the stage, or to, I don't know, to define terms or technical
Mhm.
jargon,
Mhm.
what does it mean for a child to have special learning needs or disabilities?
Mhm. Okay, this is a very fun topic. Actually, when we define disabilities, or when we define, I wouldn't want to be, I wouldn't want to say defining them by putting their diagnosis first or their needs first before the person. But we see a lot of physical, mental conditions that are much more highlighted than kids that we see in a mainstream school, or kids their age that develop or exhibit milestones that are quite not similar to your child. And anything that's associated with motor, cognitive, sensory processing, or communication and play skills, and their ability to perform self-care, feeding themselves for children, saying that they want to go to the toilet to pee or go poo poo. That's already one of the markers that we're looking for. But all throughout the milestone, sometimes you don't need to have a diagnosis. Sometimes you just need to look and observe what your child is doing, how they are behaving, and asking parents. I think um, that's a great gesture to have as a parent, to understand what the child needs before they get diagnosed, or to sort of amend that together and remediate that early on as we see them. Um, that's of course with diagnosis, but what if you don't have a diagnosis and you think that there's something like a red flag that we're kind of missing out? And I can share with you a few things that, if you're watching and you're a new parent, or you're someone who suspects that your child is at risk for something, but you also kind of, as parents, of course, I'm not a parent myself, but talking to my parents, working with families, seeing my siblings and my friends have their own families, I do know that sometimes they feel like, oh, they're going to grow out of it. And having that said, we sort of miss out some of the milestones that are very important for their development. And one of this is, of course, sensory. If they cry too much with loud noises, or they don't respond to loud noises at all, they don't smile at you as infants, they don't really locate or track toys, or when you are talking to this side of of the baby and they don't seem to look, that's also one sign. If they don't like tummy time is so important, because if they are on their tummies, they can roll over, they can, you know, look and attend to their toys. They get to explore it with their mouths, and that is a precursor for or a requirement for self-feeding. And so there is no definition of a diagnosis. There's not much, or what I would say is like a definitive. Like if you have this, if you show this, you're definitely going to have this kind of diagnosis. No, it's not usually the case. So I would not put that pressure or that fear to parents, but it is important and our responsibility to see the development and take action when we can. Yeah. Are you there? Okay.
Sorry, I had my on mute
No
because there's
problem.
a karaoke going on here. So it's it's very comforting, and it gives parents hope that you don't have to like label
Yes.
your child first.
Yes.
Yeah, so it could just be a delay,
Mhm.
and you know, but it's good that you laid out like signs. So when they see those signs, should they be alarmed? Should they send the kids to
Mhm.
a specialist already?
Mhm. That's also one good question. Thank you for asking that. Actually, when you see something and you're able to compare with a milestone or someone or a child similar of age, knowledge is power. This is what I tell to my parents. Knowledge is power. If you know, the more that you have power to intervene, the more power that you have to stimulate and delay what is a potential there. Or if they're at risk, you can delay that further. It's best. We are actually blessed over the internet. We have so much resources on Instagram. We have a lot of moms blogging about personal social development, motor development. We have therapists as well who are in the U.S. and of course here in the Philippines that help us understand more of what's going on with our child. And once we get to see that there's a definitive problem or something that we think as parents that are important for their development in the future, to be independent in the future, and then the best advice is also to have your child assessed. It's not something to be feared about because again, we have the power over it, and the earlier that we detect, the earlier that we take action, the better the prognosis and the better our child would live. The quality of life would be better for them as well.
Right. That's
Mm-hmm.
great. So now let's go on to our favorite part. Being outdoors in nature. So you said that most of the therapies that are happening,
Mm-hmm.
or the intervention, that's a term that you
Mm-hmm.
used,
Yes.
happens inside a closed space or inside like a
Mm-hmm.
therapy center. Now,
Yes.
tell us, why do the kids need to be outdoors? Why do they need to go get out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. um, I would want to, of course, briefly talk about, being in the clinics. It's not,
Yeah, sure.
these are two great avenues for children and depending on their needs, right? There are children who may need a lot of um, reinforcement in terms of focus, attention, because there are some kids who would just run around. I mean, if they're going to be in the forest and in the outdoors and the initial treatment session is going to be in the outdoors, there is no way, even I as an occupational therapist, there is no way that would force them to sit down because it's not fair. But of course, within the walls of a clinic center, the advantages of that one is you get to teach the skills more. They get to learn how to wait. They get to understand that, oh, in the group, I have to take my turn. I have to wait for my turn. Or the instructions come in directly. There are limited distractions, and so the receptivity of the child is also um, quality. We see quality. Bringing them outdoors, of course, is a whole different world for them. Even us as adults, it's a total playground for everybody, and so we cannot force the children to be like, sit down, wait for your turn, stop eating the grass, or stop hitting your classmate with a stick. These are being outdoors is a great avenue for children to explore their options. And being outdoors, I'm gonna, of course, try to discuss the physiological effects. Is that the difference is that ventilation. The quality of air when you're outside is very different from being in an air conditioned room and being in a closed space. Uh, there are studies that show that when you see something related to an environment, there's a change in the brain scanning or MRI that actually elevates or excites you more. It arouses your motivation levels, your energy levels, and this is backed up by science. And not just that, there's clean air. Of course, I'm going to delve more into that clean air. I've seen kids with their negative ions necklaces, but nothing beats being in the outdoors. Negative ions are free flowing, but extra electrically charged atoms that cleans and purifies the air. You find this anywhere that has tree. You find these atoms when you are in the park, trees, the freshly cut grass. That's what the smell of that is what you smell. That makes you feel a little bit more like at peaceful, or I don't think peaceful is the word, but more calmed and more collected in a way. And of course, there's, dirt. Being barefoot outdoors gives a lot of proprioception, sensory, something that you cannot simulate indoors with a turf grass. Of course, it's better if you want to have a transition from indoors to outdoors, but there are physiological factors that when in the outdoors, the kids are just more calmer, they're more engaged, they're happier, and it's because of these things. And these are scientifically researched and backed up.
Sorry. Right. So, as you were discussing ventilation, of course, the first thing that came to mind is our situation with the COVID.
Yes.
So, what are your thoughts on that? I mean,
Mhm.
how does it affect us being in a pandemic? Is it
Mhm.
still better to go outside, or the
Mhm.
scientific stuff?
Mhm. I mean, I'm largely for it. I am very much advocated to bring more children outdoors. However, of course, the parents are ultimately the ones who would decide on it. And one of the reasons why I think this talk is important is because we want to make sure that the parents are sure that their child is safe and they're also safe from contracting uh, this virus. I would say, of course, being here in the Philippines, we are pretty much still in lockdown. Like a lot of our parents and families would rather much just stay distance and be in teletherapy. But one important factor that I would bring into this topic is that the studies that show of the mortality rate of people who were infected of COVID is that their vitamin D levels are very, very low. And vitamin D is what we get from the sun. And the more that we stay indoors, the more that we don't get that much protection because the sun, the UVB rays that goes into our skin is processed within our skin, and therefore it doesn't just help grow bones, it helps activate certain parts of your genes that enable your protective functions for your respiratory tract, and therefore when you have when you have better immune function, the lesser of the risk that you will have of contracting any respiratory tract infection. But we are, of course, in a pandemic, and we don't know how this pandemic works for us. But because we're talking about ventilation and having the protective factors that are within the nature, it's also nice from time to time to go out. And outdoors doesn't have to be here in the park. It could basically be you putting plants in your balcony, sitting down with your child in a bean bag and having to receive that sunlight. It doesn't have to be as risky as for them. What risky is in their perspective as going out of their buildings, but just having enough sun, having good ventilation inside the room, having plants, indoor plants help a lot as well. And yeah, this is a very tricky question because we're in between
Yeah.
safety and understanding research, having faith in research, and trusting that nature is the healing factor for us to get through this pandemic.
Right. And I think, at the end of the day, it's still up to the parents to
Yes. Yeah.
decide, whether to take their kids outdoors or
Mhm.
take them out, but let them wear masks or shields because
Yes. Yeah.
we cannot really impose it on them.
That's true. As much as we want to say, okay, this is how we should do it. Ultimately, it's the parents that will have to decide, and they're free to do so.
Yeah. And there are other parents who are braver,
Hmm.
to be honest.
I admire that. Yeah, I admire them.
Yeah. So now, for those whose parents are brave enough to go outdoors, most of them, some of them, they don't want to, mingle with other kids,
Mhm.
like on a play date or something. What would you say? What would you recommend? Do you have any tips for
Mhm.
parents who don't want to interact with, other people yet, but they know the benefits of nature. So how can they go about that?
Mhm. Well, baby steps. Baby steps. So they're confident to go outdoors. That's great, but it could also it could also mean that they will have to go out like 1 hour or 2 hours away. So baby steps. They could always go out in the outdoor parks. Within Makati, we have Salcedo Village, we have Ayala Triangle, we have Legazpi Village, Legazpi Active Park. In BGC, we also have 30th, Track 30th, and also in QC, we have the Lamesa Dam. I'm not sure if they're open, but going out doesn't have to be in a province. But if they do and they don't want to mingle, of course, there are necessary precautions that we will have to you know to attend to. And one is mask, wearing masks. We have to be very hygienic. We have to encourage our children if they can't wear masks, at least a face shield, a hat, and all of the adults are wearing face mask and face shields. That is very very important. Um, when it comes to socialization, social distancing is great, and because here, as you can see in the park, there's so much space. You can have your own corner on the side, and you can do your little activity with your child. You can play badminton in one space, and that's already good. There's no need to mingle with a group of children. If the children themselves decide to play with other kids, then an understanding and talking them into before they actually go out would also help them understand why they're not allowed to do that, because we're trying at this point to be more safe, to have the experience more fun for them and not limiting, and at the same time reducing tantrums or outbursts.
Right. So when it comes to outbursts, I've had some parents ask about forest school, and if forest school accommodates children with special needs.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I feel incompetent because I don't have, a medical background, technical background. But I guess my fear comes from, what if this child gets into tantrums and I don't know how to handle the child.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any tips for that?
Mm-hmm. Well, children are unpredictable. That's one thing that we have to accept. They're unpredictable, and so is nature. So when you go outdoors, there is no control over anything. And the reason why it's great to go out is because the children themselves have that sense of control over the external factors. Um, Being outdoors and being in nature, it's both stimulating, it's both um, it, it gives a lot of energy to that child. It's exciting, and at the same time, it's also calming. So when it comes to bringing kids outdoors who may have sensory
Hello?
processing, hello,
Sorry, I think I
did I
got
get cut?
yeah, for a few seconds.
Okay, no
Can
problem.
you just like repeat the last few sentences that you were saying?
Yeah, sure. I was talking about how nature is both exciting and stimulating for children and calming. So we are talking about children who may have difficulties in controlling their emotions. They have outbursts. If you say no, they immediately fall to the ground and then hit their head. And there are also kids who completely don't understand, and there's a big change. And because they have, in the sensory processing disorder, sensory processing umbrella, like autism, it's hard. It's harder for them to understand concepts of emotional regulation. So my tip would be, as a therapist, is first of all, if you're a parent and you're listening and you have a child who need a lot of support, especially in the outdoors, the first is, of course, understand your child and ask your occupational therapist. Talk to parents of children who have special needs as well. So there's more relatable advices for you as well. Your OTs, if your child is seeing OTs, the OTs would know and will be able to train you on how to pick out the behaviors, triggers, and signs on if your child is having a difficult time coping up. And therefore, when you're able and you're more confident, then you get to ask them either they will come with you to the out to the outdoors in the trip, or have a shadowing sort of like shadowing what do you call that, like moonlighting. I think that's what we call here. Like the therapist is just behind you and they're giving prompts, so it's more of like a standby assistance for them, that if there's any problem, then the therapist is quick to inject any prompts, or if there is a possible meltdown, it's quick to remove the child out first and have them regulate in a corner, or just have them in a safer space with no potential harm that could possibly impale them or injure them. Also, if the child has higher level of cognition, if they understand more, but it's mostly difficult for them to regulate their emotions, social skills training or zones of regulation would be a good training for them. So ask your OTs and make sure that before you go out as a parent, you're also prepared of making sure that you can change the activity from a group setting to an individual setting, and have the regulation tools that you know that will calm down the child and immediately administer that. So it's a very tricky topic because not all kids respond the same way indoors and then outdoors. But again, going back, the kids don't have to do anything. This is the greatest thing about being outdoors, is that they don't have to do anything. You can just leave them there and have nature just let them free flow. If they want to cry and then they want to lay down for a bit away from the group, then it's also fine. They will self-regulate, and especially if they have been receiving OT services, they will self-regulate on their own and then get back to the group when they're ready. So it's not completely impossible to bring that. So there's no need to fear. But again, knowledge is power. If you're trained to see these warning signs, if you are able to assess and understand what could possibly lead to a meltdown, especially for this specific child, then everything else will have solutions for that.
Oh my goodness. So I love here we go again. I love how you say you can just leave a child out in nature and for the child just to, connect. I mean, you
Yes.
don't even have to give structure how they, how they should behave outdoors.
Mhm.
And that's,
Mhm.
one of the like philosophies in forest school, that we give the child space and freedom
Yes.
for unstructured play. And
Mhm.
like what you said, even if the child is just sitting there by himself, I mean, I think there's connection that's happening that
Yes.
it cannot that doesn't happen indoors.
Totally, totally. And this is why I think we connect a lot, is because my approach is mostly eclectic. It's not much of, what uh, an occupational therapist would do. Like we have a set of structure in the indoors. Okay, for today we're going to work on bilateral coordination. So we'll get the ball, we'll put them in a elevated surface, so their senses are heightened up. But when you're in nature, everything else just follows through. So even if you're not elevated, but because you see everything else and you're able to sort of explore early on, then when it comes to a structured activity, the body is prepared, the child is engaged. And with the forest school, of course, what we're trying to do is to make sure that the child has control over the activities that they want. Their imaginations flow freely. They can easily create stories and narratives in their minds and give an output with that, from that. And of course, hello? I,
Yeah, I'm here.
oh yeah, okay. There was an echo. I'm not sure if you're there. But of course, with that, it's important for them to explore and just be. That is why in a Scandinavian, model of thinking, it's usually just letting the kids be and free flowing because that's what nature is. It's just free flowing. The changes are there, and therefore, what what you have within you, speaking as an adult as well, is what you have within you is that you just let it be, and you get to regulate from that.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm saying like yes, yes, yes to everything you were saying. Okay, so is there anything like so for the parents that you meet, are there
Mhm.
any myths that we should bust on when it comes
Mhm.
to SPED and nature? Or
Mhm.
probably if I rephrase the question, are there like what are the frequently asked questions that
Mhm.
that gets asked?
Yes. I don't have much parents asking me, and I'm lucky because they trust me with my clinical reasoning behind nature and outdoor play and learning. But I do have some of my colleagues asking me like, how does it actually work? Like, what are the difficulties that you encounter? And this is why when you are indoors as a clinic in the clinic, you have a set structure, but when you're outdoors, you have to be more flexible. And speaking with flexibility, as someone, if you're an educator and you would like to bring kids outdoors, if it rains, then you have to also make sure that you have a possible activity that you can inject in. So it's not just completely free structured because a child, say, who has a developmental or special needs would probably just sit there and play repetitively, and sometimes they don't get to engage. So there's a reason why we have to be structured at first and then give them an allowance to play and explore on their own. And one question is, how do you become flexible? How do you facilitate these outdoor programs? And my answer to that is, well, first is you have to have sets of activities that you can inject in that you see would be at par with your child. If the child needs a lot of sensory play, and obviously if it rains, some of my kids, they don't like their feet to be touching on the ground. There is no way they will immediately climb up to me and not they'll be koala mode. They will not go down at all. But it's important that when these things happen, you also have to be flexible and have set of activities that you can do to redirect the child back to a structured task. And then later on, see how they're going to respond, and they can do their free play. And yeah.
Go on, continue. Sorry.
And also when I suggest, oh, we should do an outdoor session. Usually the initial they would be very adamant about what are we going to bring? What are the things that are needed? And so the frequently asked questions would be what's the type of clothing that we should wear. And being here in the Philippines is very hot and humid, and our muds here tend to stick onto our clothes really, really well. And I would always say that spandex, polyester clothing, let's not go for cotton because it's harder for them to be washed. Spandex
Now she's out. Hang on. We'll wait for her, Teacher Zharee, to come back. But if you're still joining us and if you have any questions for her, please type it in the comments below and then we'll have time to answer that in a bit. So we'll wait for Teacher Zharee to come back. I hope she can still join us. So I haven't heard anything from Teacher Zharee yet. Oh, there she is. Let me add you back. You got cut off. I was worried.
Oh my god, I was as well. I was panicking.
So you were saying, let's continue.
Yes, clothing, types of clothing.
Yes, clothing, yes.
So spandex offer a lot of compression. So if you do have a child who needs a lot of heavy work or compression, then spandex is great for them. And it's also polyester is also durable because they're also dry fit. So both would actually work well with sweat and the dirt and other things that we are not expecting. So I think just those two, and also the cost. Like if they're doing outdoors, one thing that they would be adamant about is if it's going to be expensive. But it doesn't have to be expensive. Our outdoor parks here, we're lucky that here we have grass and trees, and it's for free. There's no fees for you to pay, and so it's not completely, it shouldn't be a reason not to stay outdoors.
All right. So as we wrap up, is there anything else you would want to say, or is there anything you wished I asked you? Some words of inspiration, or anything else important you think that will be helpful for our parents and educators tuning in?
Yeah. For the parents, I want to empower you and to encourage you as well to ask a lot of questions. I think that's one step. I understand that there's so much fear when it comes to bringing the children outdoors, especially at this pandemic, but research does not lie. There is so much um, scientific studies that back up the nature's benefits for our kids as well as for us adults. And knowledge is power. Whatever you encounter with your child, knowing it beforehand will help you understand and give you time to act on anything that's uncertain at this point, of course, and of course for your children. Nature is both healing and engaging, and it's here for a reason. It's been, something that has helped us survive all throughout this millennia, and there is no need to fear of what is in the outdoors, you know.
Yay! Thank you so much for your time, teacher.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, are there any questions from our viewers? So, there's one comment from Simon. He says, "Awesome," and he sends four hearts.
Ah, thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. So, for those who want to know more about what you do, where can they find you, and how can you help them?
hmm So I do have Instagram, and that is hop.program. That's HOP dot POPROGRAM, Hop Program. And I also have a Facebook page, Home Occupational Play Program. It's pretty long, but you can easily send me a message if you do have questions in relation to your child, if you suspect anything and you fear that there might be something, then I'm here to help out and shed light to your worries. And of course, as a therapist, I'm an occupational therapist. What I do is assess your child, evaluate them and their needs, see them for a few sessions and see if they're eligible or if they're ready to go outdoors. And if they are, we do an outdoor learning. So not much with structure, but more of experience. And also, if they respond well to therapy, then move on to an outdoor nature-based therapy. So I focus more on sensory integration, sensory processing, motor development, cognitive, so school preparedness or readiness for your child to go to school, to be ready for speech therapy, and coordinate what we can to make sure that your home is also conducive for your child to develop and master these skills.
Yay! Thank you again for your time and for teaching us.
Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully one day we'll be able to see each other. We still have to make that one outdoor trip.
I know we should. So, for those who will be watching this on replay, Teacher Zharee will be glad to ask or will be glad to answer, right? Any
I'll be more than
questions?
happy to accommodate questions. Yes.
Any questions you might have. So if you missed the live session, then you can catch up in our replay, and we'd be happy to answer them for you. Again, thank you so much. I will put her links in the comment section below so you can follow her Facebook and Instagram. Thank you so much, Teacher
Thank you
Zharee. Bye
so much. Thank
bye.
you. Bye.